So I've been getting the question quite a bit on the channel, whether that's me using my Sony a6400 or my Canon M50. What are my current video settings that I'm using for my home office? And I want to dial into that in a how-to in the real world series, which is what we'll be diving into today. So let's get into it. Hey, what's up, entrepreneurs? Welcome back to the channel. It's Diana here with Entre Woman TV, helping you simplify the video creation process so that you can reach wider and connect deeper with the people that need you the most. So whether that is a more tech-based kind of a video like we'll be diving into today, or a video marketing tip like I dial into later on in the channel, then make sure you consider subscribing if that's something up your alley. But let's get to the series. So I get messages all the time, whether that's via email, in the comment section here on YouTube, or over on Instagram in the DMs, or just under some of the micro content that you see there. And I got a good message from my friend Kantis, and he was asking some different things and sent me a quick video. So let's take a look.
Hey, what's going on? Diana, Kantis here, school motivational speaker, STEM education expert. First of all, I love all of your work, all of your videos, all of your series, all of your downloads. You just absolutely rock. You are my go-to. Yes, my go-to person. Listen, so here's my setup here. I'm doing this situation, and I think I'm maybe doing too much. I need your help. So I have Ecamm Live. We're using a Canon M50 camera, 24mm lens with a speed booster. I'm trying to get this light and this look right. I'm just tweaking with my settings, and I think I got too much light, too many umbrella lights. You can see the distance back here, with my backdrop. What are your recommendations as far as the right lens that gives it a nice 4K look? My light looks perfect. Like, I want to look like you. You look like you were 5K in one of your last videos. I want that look. Let me know.
All right, so Kantis, thanks so much for the message. I appreciate that. So let's dive in. First of all, let's take a look at what he was referring to. So in this video, as well as I cut it up and did a small snippet for Instagram stories, then I was able to kind of zoom in. That is actually not a 4K video. It's not even 5K, but it is a 1080p 30 frames per second video, like you would see on the news or like you would see on soap opera shows and things like that. So that is that frame rate, that kind of a look, and what you'll see probably most YouTubers use. And that's just 1080p coming out of the Canon M50. Nothing specific or special really to get that specific look. So what tools did I use? Because people always want to know, what did you use to shoot the video? And those are always going to be linked down in the description underneath any specific video if you want to know what I use. So on that one, I'm using the Canon M50, and I'm also using my Yongnuo 35mm lens. That should get down to like an f2.0 or something like that. But I also use the Viltrox speed booster. Now, what a speed booster does is that takes the regular type of framing per se. If it's too close, like it kind of would be in this small office, my space probably isn't much bigger than what Kantis is using, and it lets me gain back some of that focal range. Because the difference between cameras that I like what's called an APS-C sensor size, which is about, like, if you think about it in French fries, which is how I teach it, which is you have small, medium, and large. You'll hear about full frame cameras and how good it is and all this jazz, and then you'll hear about APS-C size, and then you'll hear about micro four thirds. Well, think about it in French fries sizes. You have full frame, that is like the large. You have mediums that are like your APS-C, like the Sony a6400 or the Canon M50. When you take the lens off that box that you see, that's the sensor. And then you have micro four thirds, which is about half the size, maybe a little bit more, of the APS-C. So that's a small. So small, medium, and large, and those are the sensor sizes in just basic terms. The difference between full frame and APS-C, if you're curious, is, again, you have medium and large. Get a little bit more, but sometimes it's like you may not need it. So those may be cameras like the Canon 60 Mark II or the Canon EOS R, and people talk about how much extra background blur you get on those cameras versus that one, and it just gets to be a little bit extra for our uses. Nothing wrong with one camera or the other, or making one work better than the other. It's just really about preference, I think. But because a 35mm focal length, when we multiply that times the crop factor, or how much less we're getting per se comparative to full frame. That's 1.6 on Canon. So if I take that 35 millimeter lens and multiply that times 1.6, then that gives me a specific number that is more true to what the focal length would be if I put that lens on something like a Canon EOS R. So if you're wondering why that even matters, that lets me and gives me some kind of idea as to how much space am I going to need in my recording area. The reason why that speed booster comes into play is because it lets me gain some of that focal length back. So instead of it being a larger number, when I add that speed booster, I get more of that distance back and it becomes a little bit wider, closer to what it probably is if I put that on a full frame camera. I don't really care about that stuff so much, so I just want to know, is the lens that I'm using closer to what it should be to work in my space? I don't care if it compares to a full frame camera or not. I just want to know, when I put this lens on the camera that I have, what kind of a space do I need? Do I need to back up more? Do I need to come closer? And so on and so forth. Because if I put a 35 millimeter lens on this camera right now, it's going to zoom all the way in and you'll probably just see my head or something like that. You won't be able to see all of the extra stuff. So that's the only difference into why that kind of matters. It's other things that go into that, but for our uses, that's as deep as we're going to go into that. So when we take a look at what Kantis is dealing with, let's kind of critique his space a little bit before we get into the specific details. When we look at Kantis's video, if you kind of see as he's talking through the video, we can pause it and take a look and see that we see he has an umbrella light, but what we're looking at is the umbrella light is actually facing like as if I took my lights and just shine them straight on me. It's not much diffusion material there, meaning it's not anything to soften the light. Right now, I'm recording at a different time of day. I'm not trying to do anything special, get any kind of look, because we want to dial it in. So right now, this is kind of how most people start. Got the two lights that I always use and the window is open. So that's kind of as we look at what Kantis is dealing with for his lighting setup. What we can see is that he's actually using a light that's more or less shining directly on his face. And what happens with that is it can tend to get super bright and it can be kind of harsh on our skin. You'll see big white blotches that just literally don't look like our skin anymore. It's just white blotches and so forth, or glares. If we go in a little bit more into Kantis's video and we look around his office, he is sitting right in front of a window. And we can see that those blinds are closed. So let's do the same thing like Kantis would have there. We still got the two lights on, but let's go ahead and close the blinds in this image and see what we can do with that. All right, so as you can see, things are quite different now. I've had Kantis send me a snapshot of what his actual settings are on his camera now. There will be a little bit of a color difference, obviously, but it'll kind of give you the same general idea. So I'm using my Sony a6400. A 16 millimeter lens, and the reason why I'm using this camera versus my M50 is because I want you to be able to see the same depth of field as far as the f2.8. If I use my Yongnuo lens, it's going to give it a completely different look, to the point to where it wouldn't be as close to what I'm trying to replicate in his image. So if we zoom in, we can see that he's shooting at 30 frames per second, but his shutter speed is 1/50th of a second, which is what I have mine on. He's at f2.8, I'm at f2.8. He has his ISO, or the what I would call artificial lighting, has that set to automatic. So the camera's trying to make the best decision possible as to what can happen, or what, you know, as the sun comes out or as it doesn't, what should happen with it. And then we have the picture profile is set to automatic. So that may shift from if you're going from indoors and how warm or cool something is. And we see that his automatic white balance is also set to, it's automatic white balance, that's why it says AWB. But you see that W on the other side, it means that it's a white balance priority, or white priority. Meaning, if you are mostly looking at the lights, like through your phone, for example, you turn the camera on your house lights, you'll see it has kind of like a yellowish amber type color or hue to it. Well, I prefer that in some images, especially with the Canon M50, because it gives a warmer tone to the look, and I prefer one look on the Canon versus another one on the Sony, but I kind of want a warmer, true to life type of color for my type of skin tone to get it either a specific creative look or to give it something more true to life of, if you saw me in person, does that look like my skin tone? And so we see what his settings are, and there's a couple things to point out here. So for 30 frames per second, the shutter speed is too low. We want our shutter speed, which is that number that looks like a fraction, 1/50th, that number should always be double whatever our frame rate is. So what I'm going to do real quick, I can see my ISO for the camera is saying 320 is the proper ISO. So let me lock that in, and I can show you exactly, so that's ISO 320 right there. And I can show you exactly what's going to happen when that shutter speed gets too low. Not only I'm dropping that down, that's 30, 25, 20, 15, all the way down to 1/8. You see it's much brighter. It looks crazy now. I look like I'm in like a dreamlike state. And if I go even further down, it just gets crazy and the video looks kind of weird. Now, even though the shutter speed should be 1/60, 150 is not that big of a deal, but we do want to adhere to the rules in video, so to speak. So if we're doing 30 frames per second, let's go ahead and make that 60. Now, the ISO is at 320 right now because that's what the camera decided gives me an even lighting. So I just set that back to automatic there. And reason why we don't want automatic is because the camera is going to keep making decisions. So if we dial in a specific look, let's just say 200, maybe, we'll start there. The camera is trying to make decisions based on the settings that we set. If you want to get a specific look, you have to tell your camera what to do. You don't want the camera making a bunch of decisions for you. Now, I went ahead and set that at 200 for the ISO right now because I have this big bright light right in my face. And again, diffusion being up, now you would see it would be a little bit darker if I put this back up. But for the sake of the video, we're going to leave this obnoxious light right there. Other things that we want to set is the white balance. So the white balance says and adjusts the video to say what a white color is. A piece of paper should actually be white. It shouldn't look yellow. To do that, I'm going to use what's called a gray card. Now, on one side, it's white, and on the other side, it's gray. As far as the gray side, I don't know why gray works as far as setting white balance, but it does. So we're going to use that to adjust the white balance because I don't want it automatic. It doesn't mean it's going to shift or look very different from what the camera maybe already determined should be the right colors. But at the same time, I want to decide what specific settings are happening in my camera. I don't want the camera to decide that. So I'm going to adjust the white balance. All right, so I've set the white balance setting. You may say, well, that doesn't look much different than what it was before, but what happens if I did have the wrong white balance settings? Let's take a look at what that looks like. So this is now 5,500 kelvins, which is a certain temperature of the light. If you look at any boxes on your light bulbs, or if you're buying lights or something like that, it'll tell you, because one is more closer to daylight, and then another one which may be like a cooler, more white type of looking light. And then the other one gets a little bit warmer, has that amber hue, which you would see like in house lights. I want to go back to the custom white balance setting that I set on the gray card in the camera, and let's then adjust the lighting. All right, so white balance is set. I'm in a standard picture profile, so no color grading or anything like that. Now, the next thing I want to do is do something about this obnoxiously bright light, because again, even if I just hold and block the light, you'll see it gets a little bit softer than what it is right now. So I'm gonna put my diffusion back up, which is just this little disc here that just kind of drapes over my LED lights. The lights are at 100%, and that's extremely bright, so I want to show you how to diffuse that. Actually, let's do that before we add diffusion material. Let's talk about diffusion. You can get something like this that'll pop up, and you can slide it over your lights, or you can get softbox lights or something like that. The thing that you really want is something that's going to let you dial in the brightness of the light. All right, so now we've adjusted the white balance, we've adjusted the lighting, and I've diffused those, so it didn't just get this dark with the ISO still being the same and all that. It didn't get this dark just solely adding diffusion material. I've cut it back down to 40%, which is what I usually have my lights at here, because one, I don't want it to be so bright that it's so bright on my skin, and I don't want it to be still with, even as low as it is now with diffusion, I still don't want that being direct because I don't want glares on my glasses. Now, I may get a little bit from my computer screens, but at this point, I want to make sure the light is not so bright and in my face, I'm getting a glare in my glasses, and then accounting for smudges and things like that. But I also want to now start to dial in the look. Now, if you notice, I usually have some colored lighting behind me just to kind of add some bit of a difference between me and the actual background. So if I turn those on, then that tends to give it a little bit of a different look. It is a brighter day than what I usually would record it or time of day, but let's add those on anyway. All right, so now ISO's at 200. We have the white balance set. We've turned the lights down, diffused them, whether you're redirecting that or whatever, and we're still getting quite a brighter image, a different look than what I would traditionally get. So I am a little bit underexposed here, so I want to brighten that up. And again, I'm just at standard, so it depends on what you want. If you want it about somewhat there, the camera's saying that's now evenly exposed. We're at 1/60th of a second for the shutter speed. I'm at standard and things like that. So very different from where we started to even getting a look like this. Now, if I really want to dial in the settings more, then maybe I want to talk about now reducing light. The thing with lighting is that I don't want to do what I did earlier in this video, which is have a bunch of light on and then I want to figure things out. I really want to turn lights off and figure things out. So let me cut the lighting off. So now I can see, and the reason why I want to do this is explain this to you guys. You don't want to start with a bunch of lights on. You want to start with, again, fixing those basic settings, which you would need lights to adjust your white balance. But I want to start with what light am I getting in the room right now and how is that impacting my image? So if my ISO still is at 320, shutter speed 1/60th, frame rate 30 frames per second, f2.8. f2.8 is going to give me from 2.8 or lower. It's going to give me a brighter image, but it's also going to give me a blurrier background. Now, if you can tell, I'm getting some light here and my face is shaded over here. And the reason why is because the window. So before I ever cut lights on, the background lights is just giving some kind of definition, so to speak, some kind of character to the back. It's not really lighting me any, but the light from the window is. So before I adjust anything further, we started with a bunch of lights on. I don't like to do that, especially when I'm trying to dial in the settings for a room, a look. If I'm always recording at the time of day, so if it's always 3 o'clock when I'm doing this video, for where the sun typically is in this room and what's happening, where's my light coming from? I don't have the ceiling light on, but I did have 2 super bright lights on in the window. So we close that. I'm still getting lighting, even with the little fabric material over the windows. I'm still getting lighting. So before I turn anything on, where's the light coming from? And what is it doing? It's already lighting this side of my face. So if I turn on this light that is literally off to the side of me, then we now see I'm starting to get more of an even light on me. If I literally have it this way, now I can angle that and adjust where that light goes. But with the light that's coming from the window and a light that's also to my right, 40%, 4500 for the kelvins, if you want to know the specifics. But because I now have light coming from both sides, I'm more evenly lit for my face. Now, this could be the look that you want, and the look that you want is going to be specific to your interest and what have you. Now, it would need to be darker for me to get the look that I prefer. I'd have to cover the window with maybe a blanket or something like that to give it a more of a shaded look. But again, if I turn off this light of what I'm using, then I now see where the light's coming from and what is it doing. So if this was more of a look that you wanted on this specific type of a lens, then you could definitely dial that in according to your taste. Get rid of the daylight, either by recording in the evenings. If that's not possible, then blocking that light. But this is why it's not helpful for me to, really say what specific settings I'm using. You can buy the same camera, the same lights, the same lens, everything of what I'm using and literally get a different look based on the time of the day, the white balance, and what all of your settings are on your camera for your room and for what you're doing. If I put the Viltrox speed booster and a 35mm lens on right now, it's going to get a totally different look. The reason why I don't go into my specific settings, because I don't want you to think if you dial in exactly what I showed you in the video today, your look is going to look exactly the same, because it's not. It's going to look very different because your room is different. The hue of your skin is different. And you really want to decide what's right for you. Now, me and Kantis worked back and forth with getting the video to look a little bit more of what he's hoping for the video to look like. And so it did start to look different from the daylight temperature and everything probably on automatic in the video to getting it more of a look that he preferred. If you change the picture profile, see, every new picture profile does something slightly different to our skin, to our image, to our video, until we get to something that we want, and then we can dial that in specifically or leave it at something that's more of a standard, or whatever the case is, faithful, the different profile pictures on Canon, and get it to what you want it to look like. So there's no right or wrong for settings. There's no way to duplicate exactly what it is that you see me maybe doing in a video, but there are ways to get a specific nice look for your space. The other thing that kind of goes into that is lenses. And the reason why I'm giving you so much information in this video is because I really want you to hopefully dial in a setting that's right for you. I could use a 35mm lens, but if I put that on right now, it is going to be ridiculously close to my face, because I can more than touch the lens and still have arm space for this 16mm lens. Now, because I am this close to it, a 35 would be extremely close. It would just punch in. So the lens size, not just how blurry the background is going to help you dictate how close do you need to be. Do you need a wider angle lens like this so you can be closer to it and you could get more in the background? Or do you want something like what I use in my videos, which is a 35mm lens that will give me that super blurry background? It also goes down to a lower aperture. So in addition to the background getting blurrier, the image gets brighter, and that lens is much sharper because that is a $400 lens that I'm adding to a $1,000 camera, being my Sony a6400. Now, you can get them used and they don't cost as much as they did, but when it came out, it's like $998. Can you get the same thing on the N50? Sure. What did I use for that? 35mm Yangnuo third-party knockoff lens, and it is amazing in my opinion when it comes to the speed booster being added. You get more of the range back, so you can get a brighter image, or wider image rather, and you can get that aperture a little bit lower than even what the lens is saying that it could do. So I hope that this How to in the Real World series helps you to understand, like, when you're dialing in a specific look for you, you may be inspired by something that you see somebody else has, but if you buy their whole Amazon cart, it's not going to necessarily be applicable for your space. You have to look at what is the light doing for where you're recording, what time of day are you recording, and what's happening in your video that is off, making it look kind of a weird. Look at your settings on the screen and see how is this even translating from one thing to the other, and that will really help you to dial in your specific look for your video, but based on your environment. And the same thing with the lens, finding a lens that's going to work for you. Do you need a wider angle lens so you can sit closer, adjust the settings that you want, like I'm right here up on my desk, but you can still see everything behind me, whereas when I'm using my 35mm lens, it's further back and you're still only getting a small frame around me, but the background is super duper blurry. So I hope that this gives you some insight, help you to know what things to look at on your camera based on the settings that you have to adjust that. If nothing else, go ahead and get a gray card so you can begin to adjust the settings for your video. It helps when you get lighting that you can adjust and dial in specifically so that you can make it darker or brighter, and absolutely use diffusion material, which is again just something to soften the light so it's not as harsh as what we saw before. It begins to be something a little bit brighter and a little bit more customized to what you want to look, and then you can dial it in from there however you want. Hopefully this video helps you out just a little bit, if not much more than that, and gives you some insight into getting a better quality look in your video. So thanks for Kantis for sending over that quick video clip, and hopefully you're able to get the look that you want.